Hello, I'm Jim Rohn, and if you're watching this video, you're probably wondering what's really going on inside your avoidant ex's mind. Especially when they finally start to break down. You know that feeling, right? One day, they're cold, distant, as if you no longer exist in their world, and then suddenly, boom. A random message, a late-night call, or even a silence that makes you wonder if they're quietly falling apart. You're not alone. Thousands of people are struggling to understand why avoidants behave this way, and more importantly, what it looks like when their defensive wall finally begins to crack. In this video, I'm going to take you deep into the mind of an avoidant. Not just what they show on the surface, but the emotional storm inside that they try so hard to hide. You'll discover the clear signs that they're losing control, and the most surprising part, why their breakdown moment might actually be the key for you to better understand yourself. This isn't just dry theory. I'll share real-life examples, stories you might see yourself in, and some truths that will make you say, so that's what it is. Watch the video all the way through so you don't miss a single detail. Because once you understand this, you'll not only gain insight into your ex's behavior, but also learn how to move forward, with or without them. If you want to keep exploring psychological mysteries like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button now. I'm Jim Rohn, and I'm here to help you decode life's toughest questions. Now let's dive in. The limbic system. It sounds scientific, doesn't it? But in fact, it's the emotional headquarters in your brain, the place that controls everything from fear and joy to survival instincts. Think of it like a superhero team in your head, with each member having a specific role. First is the amygdala. It's like a super-sensitive alarm bell. It constantly scans your surroundings, and when it detects something potentially dangerous, like too much intimacy, it immediately screams, "Run!" or "Fight back." Next is the hippocampus, the memory storage expert. It's like a vivid diary, linking what you're experiencing now with past heartbreaks, saying something like, "Oh, the last time I opened up, I got burned. Not good at all." Finally, the hypothalamus is the body's manager. When emotions surge, it pumps adrenaline and cortisol through your body, making your heart race, hands tremble, even causing nausea, all to protect you from the threat. Now, here's the interesting part. For an avoidant, intimacy isn't just a warm feeling. It's like an emotional bomb. Their limbic system confuses love with danger. The brain doesn't have time to think, "Am I scared?" The body already reacts automatically. The amygdala rings the alarm, the hypothalamus floods the body with stress hormones, and the hippocampus whispers, "Remember how badly we got hurt last time we got this close." That's when their body enters a state of limbic lockdown, an internal collapse they can't control. Legs want to run, heart races, mind goes blurry, all before they can think rationally. This is why avoidants suddenly shut down or push you away. It's not that they don't care, it's their survival brain screaming, "Too close, danger." And that is the most intense breaking point you might ever witness in them. So how does this play out in real life? Imagine you just broke up with an avoidant partner, but deep down you still want to reconcile. You're doing everything right, being patient, not pressuring them, giving them space. At first, things seem promising. They start replying to messages, going from scattered small talk to regular conversations every day. Gradually, you feel a connection building. One night, you decide to open up. Not anything big, just a genuine, vulnerable moment. And surprisingly, they respond. For the first time in so long, you feel like the two of you are truly connecting. You think, finally, we're making progress. But what you don't realize is that while you're feeling happy, their emotional machine, the limbic system, has silently switched to alert mode. Every deep conversation, every intimate moment feels like a flashing danger signal to them. They're not consciously thinking, "What am I afraid of?" Everything happens automatically. Then at some point, often when you least expect it, it all erupts. Maybe they wake up the next morning with a strange sense of unease. Maybe during your next conversation, an innocent comment from you suddenly feels suffocating. Their limbic system shifts into lockdown mode. Heart racing, mind spinning, body screaming, "Get out now." And so they pull away. Maybe they go silent for days, send a cold message like a stranger, or even start a fight and blame you for emotions they can't explain. To you, it feels like a painful punch, as if they've turned their back on you, but to them, it's the only way to survive. It's not that they hate you, it's that their brain mistakes intimacy for threat. And if they don't recognize this loop, it will keep repeating like a broken record stuck in place. Now, let's explore the final peak in this mysterious triangle: identity fracture. If the phantom bond paradox makes avoidance feel out of control and limbic lockdown throws them into a whirlwind of nameless emotions, then identity fracture is the knockout blow. This is when they look in the mirror and ask, "If I'm not avoidant, then who am I?" For avoidance, independence isn't just a choice, it's armor, the story they tell about themselves. They tell themselves, "I'm strong because I don't need anyone. I'm fine on my own. Emotions? Not my style." That's the core of who they are, or at least what they believe. But what happens when that shell starts to crack? Imagine they try to open up, maybe with you, maybe with someone new, and suddenly the wall of "I don't need anyone" begins to shake. They realize avoidance is no longer a lifeline, it's what's pulling them down. Without that escape, they feel exposed, like an actor who's forgotten their script. They've relied on independence to define themselves for so long that when it disappears, they're left confused. If I'm not the one who always leaves, always keeps distance, then what am I? This moment feels like an internal earthquake. They're not just facing you or the relationship, they're facing themselves. And the scary part is, they don't have an answer. Identity fracture isn't loud like an argument or clear like a breakup text. It's quiet, profound, and sometimes makes them retreat even more than before. But here lies a rare glimmer of light. If they can get through it, they might begin to rebuild, not from avoidance, but from something more authentic. If not, they'll keep running, not from you, but from themselves. Now, let's revisit my famous death wheel of the avoidant, that vicious cycle I've mentioned in dozens of videos. If you haven't heard of it yet, well, that's on you. But there's one thing that always fascinates me: stages 7 and 8. That's where things get wild, where the avoidant is forced to look straight into themselves, whether they want to or not. In stage 7, called disguised self-pity, they've successfully pushed everyone away. They tell themselves, "Yeah, this is what I want, I like being alone." But then, like an uninvited guest, emptiness begins to creep in. They feel something, not exactly sadness, but a vague sense that things aren't as right as they thought. Regret starts to flicker, but avoidants aren't the type to sit and reflect on their mistakes. So they jump to stage 8, identity reset, also known as the fracture we talked about earlier. This is when the wheel gets stuck. They can't keep running anymore. Avoidance is no longer an escape, but a trap they've dug for themselves. They tell themselves, "Relationships are too exhausting. I'm better off alone. People always leave me anyway." Sounds like they've found the answer, right? But no, it's just a shell covering the truth. They're not just running from others, they're running from themselves. And here's the big question: will they wake up or let the wheel keep turning? Usually, they choose the easier way: hit reset and start over. Meet someone new, feel a bit of excitement, dream that this time will be different, then retreat again. Isolate themselves, convince themselves that being single is best. By stage 7, regret knocks again, but they shut it down. And by stage 8, they promise themselves they won't change. And so the cycle repeats, 15 times, 20 times, with you or someone else. Unless they dare to stop and face it, the wheel will never stop spinning. But what's worth noting is this: every time the avoidant steps into a new relationship or another old loop, a quiet sense of imbalance starts to surface within them. At first, it's just a slight unease, like a vague intuition that something feels off. A colder look, a missed message, a vague sense of disappointment. But when this cycle repeats enough, by the 5th, the 10th time, that feeling is no longer small. It becomes an inner dizziness. They don't just feel distant, they feel completely empty. They don't just feel hurt, They realize all their efforts to avoid emotions no longer work. And then they suddenly realize they're still in the exact same place they started, no matter how many detours they tried to take. The way they avoided pain seemed like self-protection, but in truth, it's just a psychological trap that kept them stuck even deeper. Running away doesn't soothe the pain, it only delays the collapse until there's no escape left. That is the moment of ego shell collapse, a turning point they can no longer ignore. And once that truth is exposed, there's no going back to how things used to be. From a psychological perspective, what's happening here is truly thought-provoking. If you've ever heard of the concept of cognitive dissonance by Leon Festinger, a renowned psychologist, you'll see that this is a textbook example. Essentially, the theory says that when a person holds two conflicting beliefs at the same time, they enter a state of simmering psychological tension, discomfort, and confusion. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, this conflict often silently exists within them. On one hand, they believe, "I'm fine without anyone, I don't need deep emotional connection." But on the other hand, they frequently fall into a sense of emptiness and loneliness, wondering, then why do I always feel lost and disappointed every time the same thing happens again? At first, they can still convince themselves with seemingly reasonable explanations. That person wasn't the right one, I just need more space, or I wasn't made to love like others do. But over time, they begin to realize those reasons are no longer convincing. The loneliness doesn't go away, and the truth becomes clear. They are always the common denominator in every breakup. And then, after too many times returning to square one, the mind can no longer reconcile those two opposing beliefs. Logic and emotions begin to clash violently. There's no room left to escape. That's the moment they begin to crack from within, when the self-protective mask is no longer strong enough to hide the truth. Now, let's take another look at the psychological triangle we've been exploring. The three major breaking points in the inner journey of an avoidant. The entire picture helps us better understand what truly causes someone who always runs from emotions to begin falling apart. The first point is the phantom bond, a kind of beautiful but unreal memory. This is often the most common breaking point that causes avoidance to show signs of returning. After some time apart, they realize you are no longer the replica of the image they once held in their mind. That sense of disillusionment, strangely enough, makes them feel empty. But don't get your hopes up too soon. Most of the time, they don't come back for you. They come back for the comfort the old image of you once gave them. They seek the familiarity, the comfort of an old illusion, not the real person you've become. And if you've changed, if you're no longer playing the role of the accommodating one, the pleasant one, the one who endures, then they may quickly pull away again, because that phantom bond no longer works the same way. The second point is the emotional shutdown effect, a deep defense mechanism of the nervous system. When a relationship becomes too close, too real, too deep, their survival system is triggered. They don't know how to stay in intimacy, so they look for an exit. They may disappear suddenly, coldly, as if the feelings never existed. Not because they don't have emotions, but because they're too afraid to face the intensity of those emotions. At this stage, you'll see silence, distance, and an invisible wall rising between the two of you. But when the internal storm calms down, sometimes they return, not with clear words, but in indirect ways, a random message, a heart reaction to a story, a seemingly meaningless question. However, if they haven't truly recognized their own behavior, then very soon the avoidant pattern will repeat itself again. And finally, the deepest and hardest point to reach, the ego collapse. This is no longer just a momentary disappointment or a panic reaction, it is the complete breakdown of how they see themselves. After too many times running, avoiding, the justifications gradually lose meaning. Suddenly they can no longer say, "I'm fine on my own. I don't need anyone." Or, "It's just that others aren't compatible with me." For the first time, they're forced to face a deeply uncomfortable question. Maybe I've been lying to myself all along. This is where real regret can begin to emerge. Some people will come back not with vague behavior, but with true vulnerability, a sincere apology, an admission of fear, a need to be understood. But there are also those who will never reach out again, not because they no longer have feelings, but because they feel too ashamed, too hurt, too unsure of where to begin. And if there is a starting point for lasting change, it is precisely from this collapse. But that change does not come from your forgiveness, or your waiting, or your continued efforts. It must begin within them, from the very journey they must bravely walk alone. So in the end, will they come back? Maybe. But perhaps that's not the most important question. The real question should be, if they come back, will it be any different this time? Because a return, if it's just another repeat of the same old cycle, is not change. It's merely a delay of another painful ending. Unless the avoidant truly dares to look directly at their internal patterns, their emotional avoidance habits, fear of closeness, self-isolation, and even self-sabotaging behaviors, then that return will only mark the beginning of another exhausting cycle. A seemingly new turn of the wheel, but in truth, just a replay of an old wound. And you also need to be honest with yourself. If you have already grown past your old self, the one who used to endure, wait, try to fill the gaps they left behind, then perhaps you no longer wish for them to return. Not because you don't love anymore, but because you have learned to love yourself more. When you begin to recognize the value of peace, of a mature relationship, of true presence, you will no longer be drawn to those who come and go like a lost wind. And if one day they do return, the question you need to ask is not, do they still have feelings, but are they mature enough this time to stay? Thank you for staying until the very end of this video. If you're hearing these words, it's probably not by chance, but because some part of you wants to understand more deeply about yourself, about the person you once loved, or simply about how humans function in fragile, yet very real emotional connections. Maybe you were the one left behind, trying to understand why that person became distant when things started to feel intimate. But you might also be the avoidant one, the one who unconsciously closed the door to your heart out of fear of being hurt again. Whoever you are in this story, I want you to know that you are not alone. And the fact that you're here, listening, is already a big step on your healing journey. If there's anything that stays with you after this video, I hope it's understanding, not just for others, but for yourself. The journey of growth sometimes begins from a small crack, and it is through that crack that the light can enter. Thank you for listening with all your heart. If you found this video meaningful, please subscribe to the channel, leave a comment to share your thoughts, or simply let me know where you are on your journey. I deeply value every story you share, because they are what help us heal together. See you in the next video.